Got a comment or question asking if a landlord can enforce the terms of a lease agreement for a tenant, doing something. In this case, it's like smoking outside the property. How do you do that? Hi, my name is Rob Wells. I'm the landlord warrior on TikTok and YouTube. Please feel free to like, share, subscribe to our videos. Now, from time to time, I've gotten questions from landlords asking if they can enforce the terms of the lease agreement, outside the premises, basically. In this case, the question's asking, could you have like a no smoking provision in the lease, and could the tenant smoke like outside in their automobile? Okay. And I've had to deal with situations like this, and I've had to also deal with situations with parking, particularly like on a public street, that type of deal. Okay, so let me give you my thoughts. It's probably gonna probably tell you this. The lawyer answer is it's gonna depend. Okay, so generally a landlord could have provisions in the lease, for example, that might affect the outside of the premises. Like, let's say the tenant's not supposed to cause a nuisance. Okay, now that provision could be enforced offsite the property if we can connect the violation as an incidental to the use of the property, or it extends to the use of the property. For example, like a public nuisance would be like dealing drugs. Okay, as a clean example. Okay, technically you might not be on the property, but you're using the property for an unlawful purpose. Okay, you're coming out from the house, for example, and you're going to someone's car on the public street and delivering drugs, that type of. I'm just throwing out an example like that. That you probably could enforce because we can tie it to the use of the property. Okay. Now, I'll give you another example that you probably couldn't enforce is, let's say you had you had provisions in the lease agreement regarding parking on the premises, right? You got to park in designated spaces, that type of deal. I had a scenario with a landlord. They were alleging a parking violation, right? But it was offsite the property. In fact, it was on the public street. Okay, well, the landlord doesn't control the public street. Okay, and usually I tell landlords, hey, if it's on the public street, it's not your problem. Okay, and in fact, you don't have to worry about it. Like I had landlords asking if a tenant's car got stolen off the public street, that type of deal, if they had a duty. Probably not. Okay, because that's public parking, and anything else absent the landlord doing something wrong, that type of deal. Probably not going to be enforced. That I had one landlord try to tow a car off the public street, and it's like, that's within the purview of the municipality that's in. Obviously, you can file a complaint with code enforcement, that type of deal, but that's not your problem. Okay, so it's going to depend. In this case, with smoking on site, it would probably depend upon too if the tenant is if there's like, okay, a no smoking provision usually would apply to like the interior and the areas that the landlord controls, but parking like in a vehicle, man, if it's on the public street, probably not. Maybe if there's an ordinance that prohibits smoking and there's some way we can connect that to the use of the property if the landlord was getting cited for that, which I probably am gonna say that's probably gonna be a rarity. I probably, without additional facts, probably wouldn't recommend that landlord, given a 3-day notice violation. Although if there were sightings of the tenant smoking, outside, and there's like a no smoking provision at all on the premises whatsoever, that might be actionable. It's just going to really depend. Okay. And sometimes some of these questions come down to landlords. How much do you want to spend in court fighting this? So, without further information, it could be a toss up. It just really depends. And this is why landlords, if you have this type of problem, probably having an assessment from a landlord's attorney or just going over the facts might be warranted, because in some cases you might just be spinning your wheels, and you might not be successful in court. So those are my thoughts here. So landlords, if you're going through that type of situation, you need help, you're in the Northern California area, feel free to reach out. We might be able to help out. Put your comments, questions down below. Try to answer them to the best of my ability. Until next time, folks, I'll talk to you then. Thanks.